Chelsea's manager search continues and Xabi Alonso has entered the arena. Chelsea have supposedly made first contact with Andoni Iraola to kind of find out what his situation is like and what he might want to do with the squad. Marco Silva is also still being courted by Chelsea, as well as current Stuttgart manager Sebastian Hoeneß. In an effort to get more experience into the team for next season, Chelsea is supposedly targeting Newcastle left winger Anthony Gordon. Nicholas Jackson is coming back to Chelsea in the summer, but apparently might be flying straight back out to Juventus. The Willy won't eat for Enzo Fernandez staying at the club supposedly hinges on the experience and character of the new manager, and Estevao Williams' World Cup dream supposedly is not over. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And today, I took a day off yesterday, and now today's video is going to be massive because there's so much news to get through. So let's not waste any time and just get into it. PYS posted this per the Telegraph about Chelsea's current manager picks. Breaking: Chelsea to make checks on Iraola, Silva, and Xabi Alonso as search for the new coach continues. So, Iraola seems to be the most talked about at the moment, and we have heard stuff about Marco Silva as well. Someone in my comments told me he quite recently signed a new deal with Fulham, but that doesn't rule him out at the end of the day. But the really exciting thing about this is finally we're starting to get some news about Xabi Alonso. So, pertaining to Xabi Alonso, Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Alex Crook yesterday. We were told yesterday Chelsea have reached out to the agent of Xabi Alonso, so it's really just the beginning, but it just makes sense. Like, I was really surprised he wasn't. I mean, he's a free agent at the moment. I can't believe he wasn't one of the guys initially in the frame. The conversation has largely been about the Liverpool thing, but it just makes sense, doesn't it? So, you know, if you've watched my channel at all over the last week, everyone knows that Fabregas is the guy that I want to go for. We're going to get into a little bit more about why that's maybe not in the news just yet, but out of all of the other targets, for me personally, Xabi Alonso seems to be the next best fit. Now, I am looking specifically at what he did at Bayer Leverkusen, because getting the invincible double, like, that is a feat anywhere, especially to beat Bayern Munich in the league without losing a single game on the way to it. Absolutely incredible. I think there's so many reasons why Xabi Alonso does fit the idea and the model that we're looking for, and the only thing he doesn't have is Premier League manager experience, but he's got Premier League playing experience. He was amazing for Liverpool. So, in a similar way to Fabregas, but at the end of the day, his managerial credentials are obviously far superior to Fabregas's, because he's won titles, and it's difficult because he went to Real Madrid and that didn't work out for him at the end of the day. The Real Madrid thing, I don't know, I do kind of get it though. For me, it's apples and oranges really when comparing the two different types of clubs that he was at. Bayer Leverkusen, he had all the control. He got to build the team in his image, and he is a system manager. When he goes to Real Madrid is not a system team. Real Madrid is, we are picking the best players in the best positions from all over the world and sticking them together, and your job is to get the best out of them. If you think about some of the most successful managers that they had, ultimately, yes, Mourinho is a system guy in the grand scheme of things, but not quite in the same way, and he kind of changes his style of play to facilitate Real Madrid. But you think about Carlo Ancelotti, you think about Zinedine Zidane, which is a great example because he had no real management experience outside of Real Madrid, but he's such a good man manager. And what we know about Carlo Ancelotti is not the tactico himself. Carlo Ancelotti employs a very trusted, very, very good set of coaches to work underneath him that do a lot of the tactical work. And he is not to say that there's no tactical work. Obviously, he's got to make the decisions and everything. And he's an excellent, excellent manager. But his main skill is getting the best out of people and finding the right way to work with the players that he's got. Like, that's the reason when you think Carlo Ancelotti, you don't think, he plays this system and he plays this style of football. And it was very much the same with Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane just went in, saw the players that he had at his disposal and went, this is the way I think to get the best out of them, rather than, a lot of the managers we've had recently, like Maresca and Rosinia, have been very much like, this is my idea of football and I'm going to fit these players into it. Now, Xabi Alonso falls a bit more into the Maresca category, not in terms, obviously he's been more successful, but in the way that he runs his teams. He's got an idea of how he wants to play football, and he's a system manager. And at the end of the day, we've been building a system team. He wasn't equipped to go and manage the Galacticos, and, they didn't want to play in his system. And at the end of the day, when you're Real Madrid, if Mbappe is unhappy, if Vinny Jr. is unhappy, you look at Xabi Alonso and you'd be like, well, these guys are the ones that are scoring the goals and making us the money. We're a Galactico team. You're the one that's going to go. And it's interesting because they've got Arbeloa now, who is not an amazing manager by any stretch, but he's gone in more just trying to play to the strength of the players that he's got, and for the most part has turned it around. So I think Xabi Alonso fits well in the Chelsea idea, the Chelsea project. I think Xabi Alonso, Fabregas, they're the kind of guys that I want to see. Xabi Alonso, I mean, Fabregas, it's the player thing, it's the fan connection. That's such a big part of why I'd like to see Fabregas here. But also, I really appreciate his body of work. But it is impossible to deny Xabi Alonso's body of work at Bayer Leverkusen is absolutely incredible and would fit the kind of ethos that we're looking for at the moment. We are building a young team that is meant to play into a system rather than we're just buying the best players in the best positions and looking for someone to come in to get the best out of them regardless. So for me, Xabi Alonso makes a lot of sense. PY has posted this via Alex Crook. It seems like Slot will stay at Liverpool, so Chelsea might see an opening here with Alonso. So this is a really interesting part of this story. I had an amazing chat with Jay from Talking Chelsea and Kai from Behind the Dugouts the other day. We talked a little bit about Alonso in a podcast I did the other day. Go and check it out if you haven't already. It was a really good time. But when we kind of talked about Alonso, Kai was like, he's obviously waiting for Liverpool. And in my eye, I'm like, look, the thing is, think about like Oliver Glasner and Iraola at the moment. They have already announced that they're leaving at the end of the season. I think if Arne Slot was getting sacked in the summer or was leaving, we'd know about it because Liverpool would want to make it amicable. Liverpool don't really do like fiery bust-ups quite as much with their managers and stuff. They've been such a well-run club for such a long time now. It doesn't really strike me as the kind of club that would do that. We're the hyperbolic ones that sack everyone, do you know what I mean? So, and also, I think the thing that's impossible to discount with Arne Slot at Liverpool is he won the league in his first season. Yes, he's had a bad season, but I actually predicted Liverpool falling off this season at the beginning of, before the season started, because he lost half of his team, was bought £500 million worth of players, and has been trying to implement his own football, but also still having the likes of a Mo Salah there, who doesn't necessarily fit that style particularly well. And you can see that because Mo Salah has not had an amazing season and obviously is now leaving at the end of the season. So for me, it was wild to even think about sacking Slot, despite how, I say badly, like they're in fifth place, they're going to get Champions League football at the end of the day. I think Slot's done a really, really, really good job to turn around their dismal run of form that they went through earlier in the season. I think he hasn't managed to get the best out of the likes of Wirtz yet, who, and Alexander Isak, obviously, who's had a lot of injuries and stuff as well. And also he's been a consummate professional throughout the entire season. So for me, Slot staying at Liverpool is the right thing to do. Even though it's been really rough this season, the man won a Premier League. And yes, he did it with that Klopp team, but a lot of people were expecting Liverpool just to kick on. And as a Chelsea fan, what I know is when you change out your entire squad or half of your squad in a season, it's very difficult to get them all to gel together. And also there's that and the fact that he's trying to implement more of his own style of football. So just on that, the Slot thing for me completely makes sense that he's going to stay at Liverpool, and you would have thought that would free him up for a job. Now, whether he's interested in this job or not is another thing. He was given a lot of trust, respect and control at Bayer Leverkusen, and he won't get all of that at Chelsea. That's just true, isn't it? But if we believe the PR that's coming out at the moment, the manager is set to be more involved in the process than before. They're still kind of coming out saying that ultimately the sporting directors will make the final decisions on transfers and stuff, but it sounds like they're going to let the manager be a little bit more involved. Whether that little bit is enough for someone like Xabi Alonso to come in, that's the debate to have. But we will talk about it more as things start to ramp up. And for me personally, Xabi Alonso is up there with the managers that I would like to see out of all of the ones we've been linked with. So let's move on. A little bit about Andoni Iraola. Transfer News Live posted this via Football London. Chelsea have made contact with Andoni Iraola as they step up their search for a new manager. Initial talks were described as informal, with the club sounding out his situation and summer plans rather than making a concrete move at this stage. Iraola is seen as a serious candidate after impressing in the Premier League, but discussions remain at an early stage with no agreement in place yet. So this is classic Blueco at the end of the day. If you think about when we went in for Maresca, that was a really long process. Even the Pochettino season, when we hired Pochettino, he was one of lots and lots and lots of candidates. And basically, they want these managers to come in and tell them what they would do with the squad and get a gauge on how willing they are to work with the setup, right? Which is ultimately the massive problem we've got at the moment, the setup, isn't it? But if they can show that they're relaxing on the setup, even enough just to let the manager have a bit more control over the team, then, that's a good thing. But ultimately, these early stage talks are all just about gauging what would you do with the team, how are you going to work with us, and, ultimately what we want as fans is for them to kind of keep their oar out completely and just choose a manager and let him go. So with Andoni Iraola, it's going to be a really attractive proposition for him because this would be the biggest job that he's had. He has said, he's come out and said that he's keen to remain in the Premier League as well. And there's not, I mean, there are going to be some jobs available, but in terms of like the next level, like Crystal Palace, obviously going to be looking for a new manager. Is Crystal Palace a massive jump up on Bournemouth? No, it's not. Unless he particularly wants to live in London. You would have thought that Chelsea, I mean, top teams, you know, City, okay, if Pep leaves, it's probably going to be Maresca. Arsenal, I think, will keep Arteta even if they don't win the league. Tottenham are getting relegated. Aston Villa, Unai Emery, really happy with him. Like I say, I don't think Arne Slot's going anywhere. I think he's going to stay at Liverpool, and that leaves Chelsea really as the only next step up from where he is at the moment. So I do find that really interesting. PYS posted this via Matt Law pertaining to Andoni Iraola. The next Chelsea manager could have bearing in the future of Jackson. Iraola is one of the candidates, and although Iraola said he isn't involved in Bournemouth's recruitment, they went close to signing him before Chelsea, and Iraola said he's a fan of the player. So there's a couple of interesting things in here in particular, I think. So Jackson, you know, there's a conversation to have about Jackson. I'm going to get on to him a little bit more later. But what I did think was really interesting about this is Andoni Iraola wasn't involved in the transfers at Bournemouth. You know, his team was getting ripped to shreds every single season. And we never hear about Bournemouth's model. You know, Bournemouth are bearing fruit at the end of the day, and they've obviously got good sporting directors, good scouts, because they keep bringing in players that he's able to coach and develop. So there is something really promising in there. He already is working in the kind of model where he's not getting a lot of say, but he's been trusted to run the team. That's, I guess, the difference. You know, our sporting directors, medical team and board are a lot more involved in the day-to-day running of the team than they should be. But as far as the transfer thing goes, and as far as the putting the squad together goes, Iraola will probably be an attractive proposition for Chelsea because he's already been working under a system where he's not getting to choose the players. So moving on from Andoni Iraola, we've got a little bit from PYS about Marco Silva. Chelsea sporting directors in agreement, Fulham boss Marco Silva should be a candidate and will reach out to his representatives to gauge his circumstances. So someone told me, and again, I'm not 100% sure, but Marco Silva supposedly has quite recently signed a new contract with Fulham. That doesn't rule anyone out at the end of the day. You know, we're not just going to go for free agents. There are other managers that, you know, Fabregas, for instance, I'm not going to talk about him a lot in today's video, but if we were to go in for Fabregas, then Como would be due compensation because he's got a contract to fulfill, right? You know, it's kind of like players, nowhere near as expensive, but there is always going to be some sort of thing to pay. You know, that's why Iraola is potentially interested in Xabi Hernandez, Xabi Alonso. These are free agents that we can just get, but if we go for someone like a Marco Silva, we're going to have to pay them out of their contracts. Marco Silva, again, I just don't know that much about him, really, in terms of his tactical style and identity. I know he did well at Wolves and I know he did well at Fulham. He's got a lot of Premier League experience. He didn't do particularly well at Everton, though. So, you know, I mean, you know, Frank Lampard didn't do well at Everton. There's a lot of managers that have. The only two managers that have done well at Everton over the last decade are Carlo Ancelotti and David Moyes. So, you know, maybe that's not too much of a stick to beat him with, but I just don't know that much about him tactically. And Fulham, albeit are solidly staying in the Premier League and staying out of the relegation zone, they are kind of quietly going about their business. They're never really in talks for like getting into Europe. They're never really, you know, being talked about in terms of, you know, they're not getting far in cups like the League Cup or the FA Cup. So I don't know. It's just, you know, Marco Silva doesn't have a winning credentials in any sort of sense. But, you know, and to be fair, neither does Iraola. But Iraola is just more talked about. He's a bit more of a hot property because he's done such a good job at Bournemouth. I feel a little bit underwhelmed by Marco Silva. But what I would love to know, guys, if any of you know anything about Marco Silva, let me know in the comments. Talk to me about his tactics. Would he fit our team? Do you think he'd be a good appointment just because of the Premier League experience? For me, there is just something underwhelming that isn't clicking with me every time I hear Marco Silva, but I'd love to know what you think about it. Guys, if you've made it this far in the video, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so we're going to move on to another target, and PYS posted this via Matt Law. Stuttgart coach Sebastian Hoeneß is someone Chelsea have looked at in the past. He lacks some top-level experience, but he's won a German Cup as a coach. Italian reports have linked Antonio Conte with a stunning return to Stamford Bridge. That idea might fall down at the collaboration stage. Jokes, love that. So Sebastian Hoeneß, I don't know anything about, but he's won a cup. Well, you know, I assume with Stuttgart it just says the German Cup as a coach. So I assume that's Stuttgart, but I don't know a huge amount about him. What I found interesting about this was the Antonio Conte links, right? Antonio Conte, it feels like an obvious no because of how he broke up with Chelsea before, and he literally sued the club to get the rest of his wages when they tried not to pay him. And he's at Napoli. He's done pretty well there. But Antonio Conte, he's just a shot in the arm manager that will come in. He'll beat your team around the head. Apart from at Tottenham, obviously, he's one of the many successful managers that have failed at Tottenham. But he'll beat your club and team around the head, get a trophy out of him, and then everyone will hate each other and it'll all be absolutely horrible, and then he'll leave. That's just kind of always what's been the case. We lost Diego Costa largely because of Antonio Conte, I think, which was a real gut punch because João Pedro is getting close, but Diego Costa is literally like one of the 2 good strikers we've had in the last decade. It's crazy. So I just don't see it happening. And the main thing is what Matt Law said here. The idea might fall down at the collaboration stage. Like, do I see Antonio Conte going into Chelsea with 19 to 24-year-olds, having no input in the transfers, not being given a war chest to spend the way that he wants, changing our system to that really rigid back three, which might actually hurt, it will definitely get the best out of some players, but might hurt the development of others. I just don't think I want it. Like, I loved the Antonio Conte season, and he'll forever be a Chelsea legend. And he did it with such, a rabble. I went through this the other day on my podcast. Like, Marcos Alonso, Gary Cahill, David Luiz, Victor Moses. The only solid defender he had in that season was Azpilicueta. And when I say solid, I mean Azpilicueta was like levels, do you know what I mean, compared to everyone else. But I'm not sure I see it, man. I'm not sure I want it, to be honest, because the hangover is always so difficult to get through. And if we get Antonio Conte, maybe we win one season, but maybe we spend the next 2 or 3 seasons recovering from that and desperately trying to break away from a back three, which is what we did last time Antonio Conte took over. So PYS posted this via Kieran Gill from the Daily Mail, and I just think it's an interesting point, and there's something I want to raise about it. Chelsea have some names of managers they have not made public yet as they work to make a shortlist. This is similar to what happened when Maresca was hired ahead of McKenna and Frank and De Zerbi. So there were rumours, but in terms of like concrete talks and coming out and stuff, and I think this is the right thing to do, largely because a lot of these managers might still currently be in jobs, and it wouldn't be fair to upset the apple cart in terms of the things they're trying to achieve for the rest of the season. In particular, I'm talking about Fabregas. The links to Fabregas haven't really come from the Chelsea side. Like, the majority of the conversation around Fabregas has actually been centred around what's been being said from the Como side. Como president comes out and says, we'd never stop him from leaving. Fabregas comes out and says, I'm trying to get this team into the Champions League. So, the discourse and the discussion about Fabregas has largely been coming from their camp rather than ours. So that just gives me, you guys, know me at the moment. I just want him in. It gives me some hope that maybe Fabregas is one of the names that we're not hearing about yet. It makes sense that we're hearing about Iraola because he's already leaving Bournemouth at the end of the season. It makes sense that we're now starting to hear about Xabi Alonso because he's a free agent. With some of the other guys, especially Fabregas, because they've got the most to play for out of any of the linked managers, I think. Maybe it makes sense and we do start hearing some more stuff at the end of the season, but we'll just have to wait and see. Right, so we're going to move away from talking about managers and we're going to start talking about players because the summer transfer window is fast approaching, and one of the big PR spins from Chelsea has all been about experience. And what does experience mean? Experience means players that have played football, less 19-year-olds and stuff, and guys that have done it at a high level for a long time, I guess. And that doesn't necessarily mean 28 to 30-year-olds. In my head, and I've said this a few times, I think it's like less Jamie Gittinses, less Yoro Hato's, although Yoro Hato's turning out pretty good, and ultimately less Alejandro Garnacho's, more Cucurella's, more Caicedo's, more João Pedro's, right? Guys that have kind of been there and doing it and have proven that they can do it. So this leads me on to a very interesting tweet from PYS via The Athletic. Chelsea are interested in Anthony Gordon. A deal would not be dependent on UCL. Sources say Chelsea are looking at top league, ready-made, experienced players who are used to playing in a tough schedule. Anthony Gordon fits that. Anthony Gordon is a player, so me and Kai did a video a little while ago about, we were looking at the centre-back situation, the goalkeeper situation, we kind of went through the whole squad and we're like, where would we adjust stuff and who would we go for? One of the ones we both really, really agreed on was Anthony Gordon on left wing would be such an upgrade. And it is particularly interesting because we were linked with Anthony Gordon just before we got Cole Palmer. And Anthony Gordon was at Everton. He was looking at leaving. There was links to Liverpool. He obviously ended up going to Newcastle. I think they wanted too much money for him, and a lot of people were nonplussed by it. But at the same time, what a player he's developed into. I find the narrative around England and Anthony Gordon really interesting as well. For the last couple of tournaments, we've been putting guys out on the left wing that are left-footed, or Phil Foden played there and he's an attacking midfielder that drifts inside all the time. And it always felt like, get Anthony Gordon on there because he runs and he's a winger and that's absolutely what we need. I think, from my perspective, what's Anthony Gordon now? 26, going on to 27, something like that. That's a little bit older than the other players that we've got. He's been so good for Newcastle in the grand scheme of things, and the team has changed out so much, but he's continued to be a really strong part of their team. I think it's a little bit weird that Eddie Howe's using him as a striker at the moment. But would I take Anthony Gordon over Jamie Gittins and Alejandro Garnacho? Yes, 1,000 times yes. I think Anthony Gordon would be the best left winger we have bought for the last 2 or 3 seasons. Oh, mate, it's dross. Jadon Sancho, flattered to deceive. Mykhailo Mudryk, less said about the better. Jamie Gittins and Alejandro Garnacho, absolutely not doing it. We keep deferring to put in Pedro Neto on the left wing, not because he plays really well there for the kind of, left winger that we want. He's just the best option out of everyone that we've got. So I think if we could go for someone like an Anthony Gordon, that would be a massive signal that we're looking to upgrade our team. And if the sources are right from the Athletic saying UCL is not a deal breaker for him, that's brilliant. And I would love to see Anthony Gordon in the squad. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next up, we talked about him a little bit before. It's about Nicholas Jackson. Chelsea Dodgers posted this: Juventus are monitoring Nicholas Jackson and can imagine a loan move for him. AC Milan are also monitoring. So I would like to see, especially under a new manager, depending on who it is, Nicholas Jackson come back and get a shot in the squad. Because if we don't go in for an Anthony Gordon, like I was just talking about, Nicholas Jackson is instantly a better left-wing option, surely. Although we've never seen it, we know that he played left-wing at Villarreal before he came here. He would be a better option than Garnacho and Gittins, wouldn't he? Let's be completely honest. And he's Premier League experienced as well, and also he's not super young. He also would be a deputy for the striker role. So, I don't know, it just makes sense to me. I mean, you don't know what's going on in the player's head. You don't know exactly... I mean, we all assume that the fallout was to do with Maresca, but maybe it was something to do with the owners, the sporting directors. It's difficult to say, but something did come out a little while ago saying that Nicholas Jackson was potentially softening to the idea of trying to return into the team. But according to this, Juventus and AC Milan are interested. Now, what I don't really want to see is him get loaned out again. I got it for this season because, everything that happened, the red cards, it was all just a bit hot, wasn't it? But next season, I think we keep him or sell him. I think loaning him is a waste of a loan spot. We've got a lot of players that could do with loans. We've got players that could do with loans like, Wesley Fofana, for instance. It's going to be super difficult to sell if we don't want to keep him in the team. So it might be a case of loan him to Marseille for a season or something like that. Nicholas Jackson, to me, I just don't think loaning him is a good idea. I think we keep him and give him a shot in the squad, or we sell him. And I don't think we'd be super short of suitors at the end of the day, especially you think about Premier League. 50 mil is what we'd ask for Jackson at this point, I think, because we got, 10 to 13 million euros for a loan fee for him, which was the biggest loan fee of all time. The Bayern Munich board have come out and said, we're not keeping him, even though Vincent Kompany has actually said, I actually quite like Jackson. But Bayern Munich have come out and said, no, we're going to send him back to Chelsea. So either way, he's coming back. Let me know in the comments, what do you think we should do with Nicholas Jackson? Personally, I'd actually like to see him come back in and get a shot. I like the idea of João Pedro, Omega and Jackson as striker options, but I also think that if we don't end up going for someone like an Anthony Gordon, Nicholas Jackson instantly represents an upgrade on our current left-wing options. So let me know what you think. Next up, we're going to talk about Enzo Fernandez. It feels like it's been a minute. It was Fernandez every day for a little while over the international break, but things have calmed down, and obviously just scored the winning goal for us in our first win in a game of football in what feels like forever. PY has posted this via Fabrizio Romano on Enzo Fernandez. New manager could be important. For example, if the new manager tries to talk to Enzo to keep him, there is also a contract discussion between Chelsea and the player where no agreement has been able to be found on salary since December 2025. Let's see what happens in the next few weeks. So, I don't know. You guys already, if you've watched my channel before, then you know this. If not, I'll tell you. My kind of position on Enzo Fernandez is particularly indifferent. I'm not... we desperately need to keep him, but also if we did keep him, he's obviously a good player to have in the squad. He's grown into a bit of a leadership role, and the thing I don't like more than anything at the moment is the performative nature of the Chelsea-ness. After all of that stuff with Real Madrid and flirting and trying to move, and the contract's been on the table for ages and he's not signing it, but then he scores and he's banging the badge, and in the Brighton game he stood there and put his arms on his side and was like staring longingly at the fans about how bad everything is, like trying to connect to them. It's just a little bit performative, it's a bit theatrical, and I don't really love it. So that is a big thing I don't like. In terms of the player profile, I don't think he's a 10. I don't think he's a 6. I think he plays really well as an 8, but if we're going to continue with this kind of formation that we're in with the 4-2-3-1 with two sitting midfield, like deep midfielders, I would rather, even, I guess arguably Enzo Fernandez has had a better season than Cole Palmer, but if Cole Palmer gets back to his best, Enzo Fernandez is nowhere near that 10 role. And I do think we need something different in our midfield as well. Enzo Fernandez works well in the double pivot when we're inverting fullbacks and he gets to push forward. So then he basically is allowed to create from deep and also bomb on and arrive in the box and crash box and score goals. So that specific role seems to work really well for him. But if the next manager we get doesn't do that, where's he going to play? Does Xabi Alonso play him in the deep midfield role? What does Fabregas maybe could do something with him? I'm not 100% sure. But it seems like one way or the other, I think this summer is going to be quite telling for Enzo Fernandez. He's in Madrid at the moment, and that might seem like a headline, but he's in Madrid watching the tennis with a couple of other Chelsea players. So I don't buy too much into the idea that that's a big story at the moment. But guys, let me know about Enzo Fernandez. What do you think? Personally, I'm indifferent. Like, I'd be happy to keep him, but ultimately he's not in my dream 11. I don't know. It's crazy. I just think that we spent so much money on him, but he's never really turned into the player that we thought he was going to be. And maybe that's different if we get a few extra players and things start going better. But like I say, I'm indifferent about Enzo Fernandez. Let me know what you think in the comments. Last but not least, because this has turned into an absolutely massive video. Again, I'm loving him recently. There's so much news. So we're going to talk about Estevao Willian. Chelsea Dodgers has posted this new. Estevao is not giving up hope of playing in the World Cup. A source close to the player said, "We hope his recovery will be fast. We have a little time, but the injury isn't so complicated." So that's good news. I think as a Chelsea fan with Estevao, it's a win-win. And I'm only looking at this like what I want is for Estevao to go and play in the World Cup, because for him to be getting into the Brazil team at this point is amazing. But if I'm just being analytical about it, if he doesn't go to the World Cup, he spends all of that time recovering and he gets the entire preseason with the new manager. And that in itself could mean that he gets a stronger role in our team from the off. You know, he'll be 19. I think he's maybe just turned 19, actually. So although a World Cup would be brilliant for him, he's not had a break in a couple of years. He's very, very young. And then he'd be coming back from the World Cup, getting a little break and then being thrown straight into pre-season. So there's benefits for both ways. As a human individual, I want Estevao to go to the World Cup because I can't even imagine what an honour that must be to be that young and to be one of the actual options to play for Brazil and to represent your country in the World Cup. It's incredible. But as a Chelsea fan, I do see the benefit of him remaining with us for the entirety of pre-season, and that could put him in a really strong stead in order to be a really strong part of the team going forward straight away. So guys, that's it. Loads of news today. Obviously, there's going to be lots of manager news until we've hired him, and that's probably not going to be until the end of the season. So guys, thank you very much for sticking around with me until the end of the video. If you did, tomorrow I'm going to be releasing a tactical look on Xabi Alonso. Now we're starting to be linked with him and how he compares to one of the other managers that we are linked with. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.